you might be asking, why are we at a wedding chapel? Cami and I are getting married. We wanted to kind of share with you some interesting turns of events and some of the things that the Lord has been developing over the past couple of weeks. As you know, we made an offer on another property down the road, and a little bit smaller than this facility. And we had made that offer. One of the challenges that we have as a church plant is that we don't have 2 years financials. And so when you rent from a corporation, they're very stringent upon their financials and all that. And so we had some challenges there, obviously, with our financials, because we are a church plant. We had our church launch under a year ago, and we are under 2 years as an actual entity of a church. And so we had been praying and asking the Lord to lead us to a place, because one of the things, as you've probably heard Candy and I share over the pulpit, that we've been praying about really since day one is the average church plant in Frisco. They have a temporary location for upwards of 5 to 6 years. And what that means is 5 or 6 years of setting up, tearing down, setting up, tearing down. And so most of their energy goes towards basically the administrative work of the church and less on ministry, because we just don't have a place to have it. We don't have a place for a night of worship. We don't have a place for worship practice. We don't have a place for extracurricular children's ministries and things like that. And so Katie and I, we've been knocking on door after door after door after door. Some of you guys have been knocking on those doors with me, so you know the challenge. And so kind of an interesting turn of events last week. So as most of you know, Katie and I are moving in a couple of weeks. And so we were meeting with the realtor to sign the rental agreement, and I just said, hey, if you know of any property, let me know. And she said, well, there's this one property down the road, but I'm not sure. I'll find out about it. And so Kami and I, we drove over here, and we decided to call on the number on the marquee. Well, this facility was an event center. It's been actually several event centers since it was purchased. And a couple churches, so 2 church plants have been here. It's been about 2 or 3 different event centers, and it was a beauty bar at one point. So it's been several different things. And so we called the owner, and he was very kind, very sympathetic to working with the church. And so we started this communication, and in the process of that communication, we have come to a little bit of an agreement with him. And so this is something that we need to present to you on the direction that we need to go. And we have a few different options. We can continue to do what we've been doing, and we can rent this on a weekly basis for a couple of hours on a Sunday. And basically, we're just in a little bit bigger location than we already are, and about the same amount of money that we are already currently paying at the School of Rock. The benefits of that is it's very safe and very manageable, and it's something that we can just keep going and have maybe just a little bit brighter place than the dark School of Rock that we've been in. The other option is that we would take a leap of faith and that we would lease this property in its entirety. And as we have been looking at the options, looking creatively, because that's one of the things that the Lord has really been speaking to Katie and I, that we would think outside the box, and we would not be your stereotypical church. And our desire is that we would be a church that ministers to our community, ministers outside of us. And so as we've been doing some research, and Katie and I know this firsthand, when we found out that we could not have our launch service at the School of Rock, we spent 3 weeks, every single day, probably 5 hours a day, calling every venue in the North Dallas area. So we know this area very well. And there are no event centers, I wouldn't say no, there's only a few event centers in Frisco that are much smaller than this. They can only house about 50 people. The next larger one is in Plano called Noah's Event Center. And they are booked. And where we launched our church. If you remember, if you were with us during our church launch, it was much smaller than this location. They charged us and they give us a discount. They charge us for our launch. I think it was $1,600 or $1,700 for 4 hours on Sunday morning. The average event rental in Frisco is starting at $1,500 to $2,000, upwards of $3,000 for an event. So one of the things that Candy and I have talked about and prayed about, and Mark Chandy has been helping me a lot on the business side of this, is looking at doing a church creatively where we could come into this location. We would have a permanent location. We can paint. We can set up things exactly as we want people to, as we want to present Free Church, and not under someone else's vision. Because, you know, pot pictures on the wall is not our vision of a church. The School of Rock has been great, but it doesn't represent who we are as a church. And the only way we can do that is having something that is our own, whether we rent it or own it, but it's our own. This facility, we are able to do whatever we see fit. So we can paint, we can clean up this place, and we can make this not only a beautiful church, but we can make this one of the premier event rentals in our city. And just to give you a little perspective, the rent on this, if we were to rent it full-time, is more than double what we are already paying, which on one hand, that sounds a little scary. But when you look at the fact that there are no event rentals in Frisco, if we did 4 events a month at the minimum price of any event going on in anywhere in Frisco, that would cover the rental agreement. That's only 4 events. That doesn't include if businesses have a business luncheon during the day. There's kids' birthday parties throughout the week. And the great thing is because we're in control of the schedule, we can schedule whenever we want to have it blocked off for us exclusively. Another thing is we've looked at several churches have, crazy, they've just reached out to us because there are many, many churches in Frisco, there are church plants that are in the same boat as us, that we could on a Sunday afternoon also rent to another church. Maybe they're a little bit smaller, they're not as established as we are, so they might not have the same equipment, that they could come in and have a phenomenal place to host services, and they could build, and it would be a reasonable lease amount for them, because I know anywhere else that they would go, it's going to be $1,500 to $2,000 a service for them to have, to host their church. We could do it at half the price, give them a better deal than they could get anywhere else, be a blessing to them. At the same time, that consistent monthly income eventually, I believe, would cover the entire cost of this monthly facility. And so we have communicated with the owner, and Mark and I have had several conversations with him. He is an Indian physician in town, and he doesn't even want us to submit financials. If we just say, hey, we want to take it, and we have the down payment, then he's willing to rent to us. And he just purchased this property under a year ago, and he doesn't want to mess with it. He doesn't want to do anything. And so even though he was agreeing to have us rent it on a Sunday, he doesn't want to mess with anything. And so because of that, he's giving it to us at a reduced rate in lieu of giving him a tax donation. And so, just to put it in perspective, we had called on, how many of you know where the old Dude Perfect building, they just moved out of that building, it's on the corner of Main and North County. There's zero parking, it's a little square building. That building is $10,000 a month. And that is standard for anything in Frisco. We're not paying near that much a month for this entire facility that has a backyard, it has plenty of space for us to grow. The sanctuary alone can house 150 people, and this room has, as you can see, has 111 occupancy. So we can theoretically house almost 300 people. Not to mention doing multiple services. So we could significantly grow in this facility until we are ready to build somewhere on a permanent basis. one of the things, because in Frisco, I kind of joke saying everyone in Frisco has at least 4 kids and 1 set of twins. And so, unlike in other cities where you might have an equal number of kids to adults, we live in a community where actually you might end up having more children than adults. Well, the great thing is we have so much space in the back that as we do that, we can rent a temporary building that can be put on site for additional children's ministry. And so as far as future growth for our children's ministry, we could do that. And so what we want to do is in a moment, most of us are done, but we're gonna kind of transition over to what would be the sanctuary. And I want us to spend some time, as I talked about in the sermon today, is asking the Lord, where does He want us to cast the net? And as Katie and I were praying and thinking creatively, that not only could we potentially have an opportunity that would be an income producer and not a liability, it's also an opportunity to get our name out in the community and meet the needs of the community. And entertain and be hospitable and to use the gifts that we have to touch other people's lives. And I know that it's just very difficult to find a location like this. And believe me, if we do this, it's history in the making, because I have spoken to so many church plants. They got a building 6 years later, 7 years later. They were in the high school for 5 or 6 years. And I know that most of you, because most of you serve in multiple capacities, it's a lot to set up and tear down every week and not really feel like we're focusing on the ministry end of it, but we're focusing on the administrative end of it. And I want you to just imagine what it would be like if we didn't have to set up and tear down every week, that we could just come in turnkey, and now we can focus our energy on ministry and doing nights of worship. And I've talked to Shania, and eventually as we develop a Freedom Excursion team, that we would have healing rooms and nights where people just can come in, don't even go to our church, and get ministry here. And then at the same time, bring in an income for the church. Because anywhere else in Frisco, just to give you perspective, anywhere else in Frisco, bare minimum is $25 a square foot to $35 a square foot. So to put that in perspective, a 4,000 square foot facility is going to cost you anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 a month. Anywhere. There's nothing cheaper, believe me. I've knocked on every door. And here's the irony. And as most of you know, or some of you know, we are technically not allowed to be in the School of Rock. When we had our church launch, and we tried to have it at the School of Rock, I went to the city to get a permit. They go, oh my goodness, you're not supposed to be there. And I go, well, what am I supposed to do? We're there. And they said, well, let's just ignore it for now. So it's been a ticking time bomb to even stay in the School of Rock. So if we were just to, if School of Rock told us tomorrow, I'm sorry, we can no longer rent to a church, and we were forced to go somewhere else, it would cost this much or more to rent 2 or 3 hours anywhere else as it would the same rent to have this permanently. Anywhere else we'd go, it would not be an income producer. And we have the opportunity, and we figured that with a little bit of elbow grease and a little bit of love, within 30 to 60 days, we can get this place the premier place to go. And if you noticed, we're on Preston Road. Preston Road is the most visible street in all of Dallas. And there are 30,000 cars that drive by this place every single day. I drive into Prosper every morning. And from Main Street to El Dorado, which is the next light, and then Panther Creek, which is the next light, it is bumper to bumper for 1.5 miles. All those cars drive by and they would see Free Church. And so this really is a tremendous opportunity. And so in a moment, as we transition over to Sanctuary, I want to share with you how then we are going to go about doing this, because it's not going to be all on Candy and I, and this is why I wanted to even do this. Have this opportunity where we can come and feel it and see it, and so that we can all cast the vision and catch the vision together, because this is not something that only Candy and I, we can't do it alone. It takes a collective effort from all of us. And there will be a little bit in the short term, a little bit of sacrifice, because even though it's could almost be ready as a rental. You can probably see that it's been